There we go. People say we're Darwinistic. I think this COVID inquiry is a real milestone. I'm proud that ACT campaigned and won expanded terms of reference. The new report has revealed what the Labor government tried to hide. They went too hard, too long, got drunk on power and we're still paying for it. I think it's now a very valuable asset for the country to be able to avoid future responses like Labor's, because after they doubled public debt, we literally can't afford to do it that way again.
What would have ACT done differently?
Well, throughout the COVID period, we released numerous documents, I think about 4 serious policy documents, where we said, for example, there should be greater use of technology such as rapid antigen tests. That is now borne out in the report, which says they didn't properly adapt the use of new technologies, rapid antigen tests in particular. We said that the lockdowns went on too long. There needed to be a strategy to get out. That is now borne out in the inquiry. We said that they were borrowing too much money and they were mixing up fiscal and monetary policy. That is borne out in the inquiry. So altogether, I think ACT's critiques throughout the COVID period come out very well, and had they followed more of ACT's advice, we would have had less division and a lot less debt. Unfortunately, they said, if you want to do X, Y, Z, get vaccinated, whereas we said each business and school should have been able to make their own policy, so long as it included vax or test as a substitute.
On the vaccine,
Have we learned much more substance from this report than from the first one, or from Treasury, for example?
Yeah, we have, because there is a serious balancing of the needs of society in terms of health, education, mental health and the economy versus COVID, which became everything during that period. This is important as a message in a bottle to future generations. Something like this will happen again, and you should not react the way we allowed Labor to last time.
And that finding is worth the price tag.
Beg your pardon?
That finding is worth the price tag.
Well, I mean, government debt doubled. It was $60, $70 billion. A lot of that through mismanagement of COVID last time. So yes, when you consider the cost to not only money but also people's health and education, this inquiry is a bargain.
On the question of the vaccine, there was a ruling made about mandating 2 doses for 12 to 17-year-olds based on no advice from the ministry, and the ministry didn't pass on the accurate advice to ministers. How concerning is that?
Well, they can argue they didn't have the advice, but they were so drunk on power at that point, they were putting huge restrictions on people without asking for the advice. And this is one of the key points. They started off sensible, we all agree, but by the time they were making these vaccine mandates, they weren't actually asking for the advice before they put serious restrictions. As I understand it, people became seriously ill and one died as a result of this.
The report, though, was fairly complimentary. The previous government described the response as being enviable, that we had fewer deaths per capita compared to other countries. What would you say to that?
Anyone can quarantine an island nation if you're prepared to double your debt while you do it. Yes, if you take the simple comparison to other countries which had much more interconnection, much higher population density, much less social cohesion to start with, then yeah, we did pretty well if you have all those qualifications. But once you look at the real picture, we had a sloppy response that lost its way, didn't use technology, doubled our debt and divided our society. We can do much better than that, and if they'd followed ACT's advice at the time, we would have.
So what needs to happen now?
Did vaccine mandates go too far?
Well, clearly vaccine mandates went too far. I criticised them at the time. I said that each business or school should be able to make its own policy, and that must include vax or test as an option. If you were being regularly tested, then you would be able to say that's as good as being vaccinated. Unfortunately, the government at the time banned the rat tests and even confiscated rapid antigen tests off schools.
So what needs to happen now? What lessons need to be learned from this?
Well, this is a major achievement. Labor tried to cover this up. They set their own terms of reference. It was the height of arrogance to set an inquiry and the terms of reference into their own behaviour and not ask the hard questions about the impact on the rest of society. Now that this exists, that in itself is a major asset for New Zealand because it's a warning to future generations not to do it this way. The government, of course, will be looking at the recommendations, and like any Royal Commission, I'm sure the government will accept some and reject others and move to implement the recommendations it does accept.
Did Auckland pay an unfair price being locked down for longer than health officials had advised?
Auckland was smashed for no reason, and now we have the receipts. We did pay an enormous price because, as the report says, there was no plan to get out of it. Anyone can lock down, but the hard thing is having a plan when you realise elimination's not going to work anymore. As soon as Omicron hit, it was clear that elimination could no longer work. We were hyper-vaccinated by that point, and yet the response and the power that it gave certain politicians had taken on its own momentum by that time. And yes, we Aucklanders and Northlanders paid an enormous price for that.
The lockdown was over by the time Omicron hit.
No, it wasn't. It was
December 2nd, 2021. Omicron didn't get to New Zealand until late December, early January.
Well,
Do you mean
I apologise. I might have my Greek letters mixed up, but you take the wider point that they were becoming increasingly infectious and less virulent, Delta, Omicron, and so on.
The lifting of the Auckland order, Cabinet went further than health officials advised in requiring tests or vaccinations to leave for a longer period than was advised. The government at the time told us they were following health advice to the letter. Was that a lie?
Well, I think they'd become so drunk on the power, it was becoming easy to just do things and be roughly right. Because they were dealing with people's basic freedoms and lives and often their livelihoods, they should have been more diligent in following the advice that they got, or even been prepared to accept other advice. I mean, the public health advice was often far too melodramatic and conservative. It focused on the virus, not everything else that people were facing, and they were going even further than that. All right, folks, thank you very much. Cheers.